Hello and welcome to Lore Watch, a roundtable freeform discussion about lore and your favorite media. I'm your host, Joe Perez, one of several lore-focused folks from Blizzard Watch, and I've got my stupendous co-host with me today, Matt Rossi. How you doing today, Matt?
I'm okay. I'm kind of obsessing over something I picked up the other day. Uh, and just, it's the way my mind works. It's like just going over things in it.
I mean, to be fair, that's something I think we both tend to do when we get to something new or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
we enjoy. So- But today, we're not going to be obsessing over that. Today, we're going to be obsessing over your questions from our wonderful listeners out there. If you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, be sure to send those into podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. You can also hit us up on Discord. We have the Q and Podcast Questions channel, which is open for everybody. Same rules apply. And if you are a Patreon supporter, we have the Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel, where we have set up as a place we can look there first. It's our way of saying thank you for our Patreons for helping keep the lights on and allowing us to do this and all of our wonderful content that we produce. But without further ado, let's get into the first one. And this one is from Tetsemi. Based on rumors, data mining, and rapid speculation, if Demon Hunters gain an additional DPS spec centered around the Void, what sort of lore do you want to see explored, and what theories immediately sprung to life with this combination? What other class and spec would you like to see come together? Night Elf Paladins are a given. There's a lot that we've talked about this a little bit on the main podcast. We haven't really talked about it here. So I'll turn it over to Matt first, and he can give his opinions, and I'll come crashing in with mine.
First off, I think everybody should be able to play a paladin at this point. In fact, if I were granted magical powers or whatever and could just make a wish and make it happen, I just think every race should be able to be every class. It's just,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
just
mean,
just just let everybody do everything.
at this point, I think you're right, but I mean, let's handle with the specifics here first, because I'm
Yeah.
absolutely with you on that.
But in terms of, the Demon Hunters getting a void thing, that's not surprising based on we've seen warlocks summoning blueberries forever. Uh, there's been like at least one boss who was both fell and void back in, I think, yeah, back in Warlords. That guy was created by Gul'dan, who just has never met a cosmic force. He hasn't wanted to try to jam into another cosmic force. He's like the Reese's peanut butter cup of evil.
Which will relate to a question we're going to answer later.
Yeah. In terms of, I don't really know what lore. I mean, we're gonna get about. We're going to Koresh. A lot of the void lore I'd want is probably already gonna happen. So can't really think of anything specific I want to know that I already know I'm gonna see it. You know what I mean? Like the stuff that I want to see that relates to the void and void beings and why there's, why would a demon hunter get some void in him? Already is part of stuff I've seen that is spoilers. So I can't really talk about it. And I mean, do we do a spoiler warning and just talk about it, or do we just
Yeah, I
not
think we
yet?
do.
Because it's not even out. Okay, well, this is me now saying in 5 seconds I'm going to do some spoilers. I would jump ahead about a minute. Okay, there you go. That's the warning timeline. We see in Ghosts of Koresh that Nexus Walker has made an alliance with our everyone's favorite evil knife. Xal'atath and Nexus Walker have made a deal, and that deal relates to Dementius and what seems to be Xal'atath wanting to work against Dementius, and it's sort of
Well,
implying that Xal'atath's plans are anti Old God.
well,
Go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say there's a little bit more to the context for that. I think we just want to throw in
Yeah,
there
but
real quick, since we already
go
since
ahead.
we already did the spoiler warning. We found out through our machinations and through the questing here that the reason that the Ethereals are the Ethereals is because of Xal'atath. And because it was Xal'atath's plan in order to do that to help them fight against Dementius in the first place. Which brings us to a conversation we had earlier where I believe Matt and myself both called out, we don't know if Xal'atath is actually pro-Void or anti-Void or what the case is. And well, now we're starting to get that inclination. But we make a deal. It's not just Locust Walker. It's us. We make a deal with Xal'atath because she is the reason that the Ethereals were able to survive Dementius and do the Mana Vault stuff. So, little extra context there since we already did the spoiler warning.
So that's one of the things that I would have wanted to see. I know I'm going to get to see it. And so, again, I don't know of any more lore I'd want to see than what we're already getting. We're sort of getting the Void lore. I don't know of anything further that I can think of off the top of my head that's more important than that. I feel like one of the things we're going to eventually find out is that all of the various void things and old gods and all of that, they don't die. Like, it's going to finally be revealed that none of them are dead, that they can't be dead, that killing them just pushes them outside the cycle for a bit and then they come on back. And we've kind of already seen hints of that with, for instance, Dementius, who is the major villain of this patch and who was, Snuff. We killed him already. We killed him in BC, and it's basically just kind of a big inconvenience. And based on what we've seen with the demons and Fel, I wouldn't be surprised if this was true for a lot of different entities. Like, death is a thing that affects beings from our reality because it involves our anima. Entities like them, none of them seem to go to the Shadowlands unless they invade it. Like, when you see void beings in the Shadowlands, they're there because they're invading the place. They're not supposed to be there. And when the Naru go there, the Naru just invades and burns people up. They're attacking it. They're not traveling to it. They're not part of the cycle of anima. They do not live. They do not die. They are outside the cycle. That's true for all of these other beings, and I think that that's something that might be interesting to see. But that's the only thing I can think of that I'd really like to see explored with other, with like a new void class thing. In terms of like what other class combinations I want to see, I mean, I don't know. I kind of like to see Shaman getting, like, if we think of anima as spirit, if we think of it as the fifth element that Drekthar talked about to Thrall all the way back in was it Lord of the Clans?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all the way back in Lord of the Clans, Drekthar talked about this fifth element to Thrall. I wouldn't mind seeing a shaman spec or sub-spec or talent base or what have you that deals with anima and spirit and that aspect of shamanism. So maybe it's I mean, or a warrior that does something weird because it's me and I love warriors. But I like that warriors don't have anything that involves calling upon a higher power. If that makes sense. I like that warrior stuff tends to be, I get really mad and pick up a second giant weapon and swing both of them at you, or I get really mad and I get extremely cold and precise and I am a master of specific combat style, or I get really mad and I hit you with a car door that I found. I don't. If we're gonna have a fourth warrior spec, I would just like it to be I get really mad and I like heal you with the power of yelling. I mean that's pretty much like, imagine a warrior battle res that is essentially just screaming at people till they get up. Like, I'm dying. Tell my wife you're telling yourself, you gold breaking bleep. So yeah, I got nothing on that one. The shaman thing is the only thing I can really think of.
Yeah, so going back to the whole Demon Hunter thing just for a few moments, so we are getting a whole plethora of story revolving around Void in general, but specifically with Demon Hunters, one of the things I'm looking at is the fact that it now opens up the Demon Hunter lore, the creation lore, to more than what we've seen, right? So when we were introduced to the idea of Demon Hunters in the Illidan novel and then in game, it's this idea of this process of in this case, an elf or night elf, blood elf, high elf, whatever version of elf you are, essentially wrestling, taking in a demon into themselves, wrestling with it, and getting control over it, and then constantly keeping it in check inside of them. Or they can get consumed by it and die, or they get consumed by it and go crazy, and then we have to put them down. But the idea of the void being a source of power for a demon hunter is it opens it up to all sorts of cosmic entities. Because at that point, you could have a demon hunter potentially that is fueled by light. You could have a demon hunter that is fueled by pure arcane. You could have a demon hunter that's fueled purely by any of the elemental cosmic forces that we have available to us. And I think that's kind of neat because in the same way that paladins can derive their power from really any type of source, if you really think about it, because paladins aren't just light based. We've seen Loa based paladins, we've seen fire based paladins, we've seen all sorts of different flavors of it. And the single night elf paladin we see a moon based paladin. Yes, it is light, but it's a reflection of light, and there's a whole other thing inside of there we could argue for hours about. But I like that idea of sort of the perception of that power being broadened. And I think that is one of the more interesting aspects of it. It's very rare for Blizzard classes to really start opening that up and sort of broadly defining what makes a class that class. So for the longest time, paladins where you worship the light and you are a warrior, go forth. Shaman where you talk with your ancestors and make deals with your elements, go forward. Demon hunters, you have a demon inside of you, and if you ever let it out of your sight or let your guard down for even one iota of a second, it's going to eat you from the inside out. So expanding what that is really, from a player standpoint, at least in my concern, or as far as I'm concerned, cool. Like, it is really neat. Especially when so many of us tell stories of our characters and identify with our characters in so many different ways over the game that's been around for so long. This sort of like bleeds into that. And I think it's really good story-wise because now you're not just restricted to one specific thing. One of the problems with Death Knights, right, is that as far as the story was concerned for the longest time, they were created by the Lich King and then broke off and then did their own thing. And that they could only ever be created by the Valkyr or under the control of the Lich King. And then we learned out that the Valkyr were not just what the Lich King had, that there were more of them. And that the Valkyr were not a perversion, but a weird take or a modified take on the Kyrian. So now it started opening up all these possibilities of the fact that a Death Knight isn't necessarily just a Death Knight because of what the Lich King made them. Other things can now potentially open up that door to become or be considered Death Knights, have similar power sets, but derive it from a different source, which we've talked about too in this context with necromancy. The light can do necromancy, whereas before, necromancy was all about basically darkness and decay, and it was its own specific school. But now we literally just had, in this expansion, an entire storyline about how the light does necromancy. So all of these avenues are starting to open up for all of these different classes that are challenging sort of the classical interpretation of where they get their identity from. The identity itself isn't necessarily changed, what they are, but where they come from to get there. That journey changes and shifts and means that you're not just everybody's a one-note song. It's not, I must suffer, therefore I'm here. And Matt brought up Shaman. We've already seen different flavors of Shaman. We've never really explored it as a player character too much, but every time we've added a new lineage to the Shaman line, we've added a redefinition or a different path of how Shaman became Shaman. So,
I mean, I will say that we have explored it with one in particular.
Goblins?
No, Culterans.
Yeah, Culterans is another good example, but I'd say Goblins.
I mean,
too,
Goblins, we already kind of knew that we had done that because they've been around for long enough that it feels like at this point we well and truly understand that goblins do the same thing. They just do it from a different mindset, which is actually also what Dark Shaman do. It's essentially the same thing, except it's for a very different mindset. And that's what's interesting to me about Cult Herons, because their shaman are very. It's like they have shamanism, but don't understand that they have shamanism. Like the whole water priest thing. It's like, no, you guys are shaman. You know that, right? No, we're water priests. Like, no, you're doing earth. You're doing earth shock right now. Come on.
Hmm.
No, it's water shock. No, we already have a water. But I like that weird, almost stunted shamanism. You can imagine actual shamans running into the Culturans and like out of pity, trying to explain to them, no, that's fine. It's great. That thing you're doing is great, but you can also do this and this. See how you can do that with this? Isn't there like, I guess like it's always felt weird to me that the Culterans seem to be like backing away from everything but one aspect of it, which
Yeah,
is cool.
but I think it also opens up the opportunity, and I'm not saying that this will ever happen, but this is me, the pie in the sky moment, right? This is the, if I could start redefining things and have really cool things, whether it makes sense for the game or not, this is what I would do. Like the idea that we don't, warriors in World of Warcraft are fighters and barbarians and arms masters all in one, but they're on the cusp of just being spiritual warriors as well. Like the whole avatar of the mountain thing, and that they can be this whole aspect of embodying sort of like this locus of power is right in line with what enhancement shamans do on the tin, right? Like it's literally the class fantasy of enhancement shaman. And a lot of shaman were incredibly like fantastic warriors. I'm looking at Drekthar. He wasn't just a shaman. He was an amazing warrior till he got old. That's a whole storyline about that. So this idea of, maybe a warrior becomes a warrior instead of purely a shaman because it eschews, I'm not healing. I'm going to use this to protect, but I'm going to do it in a different way. Like, I like that idea of sort of breaching into that, and that's not just because I want shaman tanks back. That's a whole other thing. But it's just a really interesting concept. We've seen this with hunters, we've seen this with mages, we've seen this with warlocks, we've seen this with priests. Like all of these have sort of like these different aspects of them that still lead them to the same point, but they have a different origin story. And I think that makes the world feel more vibrant and more alive, at least in my opinion. So I'm excited for that. And I would love to see them look at this doing more, with the ultimate goal in my mind of having all races being able to play all classes, because I think that makes the most amount of sense game wise, but I also think it makes the most amount of sense class fantasy or player fantasy wise by giving you essentially unlimited potential for whatever
I think,
combination you wanted to do.
yeah, a while back we talked about um, cosmetic class options.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was when we were talking about spellbreakers as paladins and how you could have a paladin build that was just all spellbreaker stuff. Um, and one of the things I've always thought is that you could have an entire you could have if you play a gnome warrior, let's say, you could have a thing where you basically they all have the same abilities as everybody else, but instead of their avatar ability being channeling like a mountain king type thing, it's literally they rock up in like they hit their watch, or it's like holding up their Zord summoning device from Power Rangers, the Morpher, and they summon a suit of armor around themselves for like 20 seconds, and they're just bashing everything with big robot fists. And then it just, that's the limit of its power, and it collapses back into a wristwatch. You could have, gnome hunters who basically just have they have a big mechanical gun arm that shoots, they can't shoot this gun themselves. It's too big. So they've got like a Warhammer 40K Techno Priest extra arm that does the shooting. You could have a lot of flavor in classes based around stuff like that is unique to not necessarily a race, but in some cases a race, but unique to a certain approach that doesn't need a mechanical difference. It doesn't need a new spec. You could just have this be a different way to do certain specs. It's just cosmetic.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that got resisted so hard. I feel like it's still something they could and should do. Like imagine the goblins who have like all their special. If they're a prot warrior goblin, all of their special prot warrior stuff is basically explosives they have they're attaching to their stuff. So when they do shield slam, they have a bomb on the shield. And it hits the guy in the face and it blows up. And since it's a shield, it directs the blast into the guy. And that's just one of many things. Heroic leap, bomb feet. Titan's grip. I mean, I don't know. That one, they have big weapons. But the bug weapons could have bombs strapped to them if you wanted. Point being, there's lots of room for this kind of stuff. And it doesn't cause balance issues. Or at least, not any more balance issues than the class would already have. So, I don't know. I would like to see them do more with classes in that regard. And that's one of the reasons I want to see them do, like, let everybody play every class. But I also think, like, when you were talking about you could have, different power sources for different classes and so forth, one of the first things that hit me while you were talking about that was imagine if you could be a warlock of the light.
Yeah, why not?
And the packed entity, because you can do that in like other games that have warlocks in them.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if you're literally a warlock who's, instead of making deals with demons, is calling on the Kyrian or calling on Titans or just calling upon whatever random light entity seems to be around, or what have you. You could have a warlock who's got elemental patrons, and the difference, you don't want to like step on shaman's toes here, but you could definitely make it so instead of the way shaman work, where they essentially work in an enlightened sort of symbiosis most of the time, the dark shaman could actually be represented by warlocks. And all the stuff they do is just reflavored to be stuff they're forcing out of the elements. So there's a lot of room for it, and I think it would be really cool. But in the end, I don't, in terms of like what we're going to see for like lore out of this, I don't know. I in terms of void lore that we're going to see in this expansion, I am already kind of like giddy. I don't know that I can ask for more. I can't think of anything. It's like when you get home and there's an enormous feast of all the food you like, and then someone's like, "Hey, do you think we should get a pizza?" And I'm like, "Dude, I've already got all this. I can't eat a pizza too." So I don't know.
Well, that's going to lead us into our second one, which is going to be from KTS Stories here. What do you think is going on with all the people, especially villains, who are trying to combine two or more cosmological forces in WoW? It seemed like this was a thing in the new Koresh audiobook, and I was reminded of Deathwing and Shadowflame. I just recently ran Warlord's Hellfire Citadel, and Xal'atath had a similar thing going with Fel and Void. Even the Titans might be implied to have tried it with the dragons pre-Galakrond. It feels like something we might be learning more about soon. Like I said, it kind of ties back into that, but I feel like as soon as you are aware that those cosmic forces exist, you are immediately trying to, like, if you are a villain, you're trying to figure out how to make it benefit you. And Shadowflame is probably one of the most, it's probably the longest running one besides essentially Fel, which is the combination of two forces or the destruction of it, right? It's technically when Light and Void like break down.
It's it's basically in Legion they talked about how it's rooted in the mutual destruction of both like light and shadow, and that's why those engines destroy souls to create Fel, because the soul of a being, the anima of it, you might want to say, is rooted in all cosmological forces. But it is an interesting thing to think about.
But almost always the goal, at least with these villains, is to either create something more powerful or to create something more destructive or to harness something their own way.
Well,
So
look at we see that not just with the Shadowflame itself. Look at almost everything that worked for Deathwing.
yeah.
He's got chromatic dragons where he's trying to create a dragon that has the powers of all the other dragon flights.
Mm-hmm.
He's got the Twilight Drakes, which is based on the Nether Drakes. Nether Drakes are drakes that were exposed directly to the power of the Twisting Nether, and then he goes and makes it weirder by making it into the Twilight Drakes. And so that's basically like, again, it's another like, I want to have dragons, but also this. Gul'dan's use of Zul'Farrak was created by Gul'dan, who wanted to be able to simultaneously use Fel and Void. Why did he want to do that? Obviously, it's Gul'dan. You can never ignore the simplest evil possibility, but it does also beg the question, why did he feel like that was necessary? Because Gul'dan doesn't do anything just because he's evil. Because, if he did, he'd literally be busy. Like, he'd never have time to do anything else. So if Gul'dan thinks I need a creature who can tap into Fel and Void at the same time, why? Is it because the Naaru were opposing him? Because the Naaru are a really good example of an entities that use two cosmological forces simultaneously. They literally flip between them.
You're absolutely right. And with the Zul'Farrak thing, it makes me think of that might not have been the end point. Right? So
No, because once he gets 2, what's stopping him from going for 3 or 4?
well, the reason I say that though is a little. I don't want to say it's more than that, but like just looking at it, we've already established that Fel, at least as far we know it, is like the breakdown between light and void when it meets. So you have this entity that can tap into the Fel. Now you're having it stably, or at least attempting to stably be able to tap into void without it being immediately converted into Fel or overpowering the Fel and becoming completely void again. Why wouldn't you try for the trifecta at that point? Why wouldn't you try to make the ultimate weapon for what you are immediately facing? Because at that point, too, like it becomes an ultimate weapon against the Legion. Like it is literally all of the forces that it needs to fight back against the Legion. Gul'dan could, in theory, get his freedom. So,
Or be Gul'dan being who he is. If he has a big thing that can basically wreck on the Legion, get rid of Kil'jaeden and Archimonde. And then now, why can't he be in charge, especially if he's got control of the giant uses all the forces thing? Once he's got that on a leash, Gul'dan is never shy about trying to seize ridiculous levels of cosmic power. I mean, he heard about the Tomb of Sargeras, and he immediately decided to go in there and find the secrets. And multiple people were like, that's not a great idea. And Gul'dan's like, is it going to make me more powerful? Because if it is, then I'm doing it. So this is not a guy who is shy about, now I wield ultimate cosmic power kind of guy. So yeah, I feel like there's multiple reasons for that. But 2, like another example, imagine being an undead, and not a forsaken undead. You're straight up Scourge, and you're controlling the light. Zer'Zeliek proved that worked. It's not like with Kaliamenethil, who is powered by the light. Zeliek is straight up powered by the same evil magics, the same death magics as the Scourge in general. His power ultimately comes from the Jailer, and the whole power coming through the Helm of Domination at the time. So his power is that power, but he can still control the light and use it as a weapon. And yes, it hurts him, but it doesn't stop him. It's like the light can't stop him. Once you can do that kind of thing, even if you don't mean to be evil, if you're not trying to be a bad guy, you're still kind of like messing the apple cart up here. And Zeliek knows it. Zeliek tells you to run away from him. He doesn't want to do this. Because Zeliek was still dominated by the Lich King, even while he himself was controlling the light. Which meant that now the Lich King could control the light through Zeliek. Imagine if Arthas had figured out how to do it without Zeliek. You think he would have stopped? Arthas was a paladin for years. You think he wouldn't have tried to get the light if he could? So yeah, there's lots of possibilities there. Getting able to control more than one cosmological force, especially at the same time, it is inherently better than only having one of them. Because now you have fallback options. Oh no, I'm fighting a bunch of void beings that barely even feel like I remember back in the day when we were all raiding Molten Core and all the fire mages were just like really mad because fire wasn't doing anything. Now imagine that instead of having Blizzard come along and essentially make it so fire burned fire, which I'm okay with that because I'm made out of meat, but if you threw like a 300 pounds of meat at me, I'd still be in trouble.
It would hurt.
I don't just absorb. I can't just eat the meat that fast. So I'm okay with like burning things that are made out of fire with fire because you assume you just make it too hot. And the things like, it's like, oh God, I'm like a dog and I have to lie down and pant. So I'm fine with that. But like, imagine if mages could have done Frostfire Bolt back then. It's like, oh, you like fire? Well, have some frost with it. So yeah, it is interesting to see. Even player classes have done it. Like we just mentioned, mages with Frostfire Bolt. That's them combining fire and frost. They, using two at once. I think you could even argue druids do that. Because druids do a lot of arcane stuff. In addition to their natural stuff, the nature magic they do a fair amount of arcane stuff too, like wrath. So yeah, I think it is pretty common.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think there's a lot of like, again, I keep coming back to Shadowflame, and we talk about how dangerous it was, and like that's a whole story.
I mean, you needed
right?
you needed a special cape to even get through it. And that was back when that wasn't common.
Yeah, and even then, we didn't know about the origin of it prior to, really prior to Dragonflight, right? We
we
learned
had
about
no idea.
We learned about it as being an actual creation of Deathwing during that. So before then, we didn't know that it was something that somebody created. But then you go looking back at it, and it makes a certain amount of sense because he needed something more powerful. He was listening to the whispering of an old god. Potentially, we don't know the full story. It might not have been fully the whispers that drove him mad. He may have been seeking to control the void. He may have been seeking to do the same things Argaris was all along. He may not have been actually nuts.
Or for that matter, too, another thing to think about is Xal'atath and her actions are pretty reminiscent of Deathwing.
Yeah, very much so. There's definitely a lot of overlap there. And this is not me being a Deathwing apologist. It's more like it may have been more complicated than we believe.
It may have been self-inflicted, which would actually be worse. Like, he didn't just get corrupted by whispers. He went head first into the whispers, listening as intently as he could to glean their secrets. We don't know that that's what happened, but we don't know that it's not what happened either.
Well, you make an interesting point there, and one that I've been thinking about since that raid, which is quite literally, if he created Shadowflame, we don't know if the Shadowflame came after he was already listening to the whispers or had that door open for him, or if Shadowflame came first. And if in his pursuit of creating his things, his army, his craft, his weapons, that's what opened him up to sort of being tipped over the edge a little bit. So
yeah,
it's like a little bit of the chicken and the egg. We don't know what came first. So
it's also a bit Lovecraftian because it's the whole idea of I want to use this to fight the evil forces in the earth, in the deep earth, but in so doing, you unlock this. You're opening yourself up to them. He who fights monsters, a monster might become, sort of thing.
Right, which also begs the question: like, what was Shadowflame potentially powerful enough to actually end an old god? The way that it's talked about, presumably, maybe.
Yeah, it certainly seems like it might have been able to.
Right, which is one of the reasons why Fyrak really wanted it, because he was going to not just burn the world tree, but anything that stood in his way. Honestly, so there's a potential that this may have been very much that. It may have been him looking for a weapon to end something that his, I don't want to say betters, but the people who came before him who presented themselves as better than him could never do. Right? Like we've established that the Titans, they were able to, and I'm going to air quote, kill an old god at great cost, only to find out later on that it didn't actually kill the old god. It just made it change forms, really.
Yeah, instead of just one big old god, we now have a whole bunch of like bags of old god juice everywhere. Yeah, not good.
Right? And then the rest of them just got imprisoned, and those prisons were not good. Like they weren't complete. They weren't capable of holding them forever. Like we saw that with Cthulhu at first, and then we saw that with Yogg Saron, where his influence in the Serenite was spreading everywhere. You see that the provisions that they made to try to contain it weren't enough. And if you're tasked with keeping Azeroth safe, and you see this, and we've argued this before, and I'm going to go back to Deathwing because why not? But if you are tasked with being the guardian of the deep places, and you can feel the deep places, because every Titan prison was where? Deep in the earth, deep in the flesh of Azeroth. For every single prison they put an old god in, or wherever they contained it, everything was below ground.
I think that's partially because they didn't put the old gods in those prisons.
They built the prisons around them. Yeah.
Around the old gods. The old gods were already in there.
Oh, yeah, no, 100%. But it's like, but they're already there.
Yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying it's interesting to think about that concept. It's like the best you can. It'd be like if somebody comes to you, you're a doctor, and you're treating somebody who has, like, say, cancer. And instead of trying to remove the cancer, your only option is to essentially build a box around the cancer so it can't go anywhere. And that's inherently, like, if you're Deathwing, you're going to want a better solution than that.
Well, especially because you can feel it. You can feel the clawing at the walls. You can feel the intrusion of this foreign entity on the planet, because you were literally made to do this. You were made to feel this pain. Like, Of course, in my mind, like, you would look for a solution that eliminates the problem. If you've got a tick, you don't just leave it on the body. You find a way to remove it from the body. That's just how this works. So,
and here's now something that you've caused me to think while you were talking about that.
Go for it.
Shadowflame is a combination of, void and fire, ultimately.
Void and dragonfire, yeah.
Yeah. What entity do we know of that once empowered somebody so well that they killed an old god?
Elune.
And what does Elune do to the beings she chooses? What does she call them? What do they become?
Night warriors.
And what did Elune do when she created a night warrior in Darkshore? What did she do to the sky?
I mean, besides it going dark?
She blotted out the sun.
Yeah.
She created a permanent eclipse, which means Darkshore was permanently in shadow. So, was Deathwing kind of on the same track there? Was he like going, oh, wait a minute. Oddly enough, the force that seems most effective against the Void is the Void. And we see that with Locust Walker and Alaria.
And Xal'atath.
Yeah, Shadow and Void power can work really well against Shadow and Void. Maybe even better than Light does. Because when you use Light and Void against each other, what do you get? Fel. So if you don't want to make a lot of Fel and burn reality in wherever you happen to be, Void might be the go-to force. It's the safest thing to use against itself. And by creating something like Shadowflame, you're literally burning Fel. I mean, not burning Fel, burning Void. Like, that's Void seems to be the fuel of Shadowflame. So, yeah, it's there's a lot of interesting little ticks to this that don't necessarily come together fully right now, but which you can look at and go, wait a minute. You know, I like, what was the deal with Natalie Celine? Why did Xal'atath basically betray her? And how is that, like, Natalie Celine is the reason humans had shadow priests. She invented it. Except the night elves had priests and they had shadow priests. Did they get that from Elune? We already know Elune has multiple facets. Is one of them basically a new moon / eclipse version? Like the where the night warrior comes from? Is Elune somebody who, like, we've already talked about how Elune kind of resembles or seems to be similar to Inaru. Is Elune also cosmically tied to both light and void?
This is a distinct possibility that we'll likely learn more about, if nothing else, if not this expansion. I would be shocked if we don't get something along those lines inside of Midnight.
It would definitely seem so.
Yeah, seems like exactly the sort of expansion where that would be. I don't want to say viable, but quasi important. But hopefully that answers your question. And we're going to go ahead and move on to our next one. This one comes from Razorbug. So, what pure gameplay mechanics, graveyards, hearthstones, etc., have produced interesting lore to enrich the story? When Anduin straight up said nope and hearth out of somewhere in the Three Hammers book, I actually said finally out loud. And on the flip side, what new lore do you have as your own headcanon to explain purely gameplay mechanics that haven't written official story yet? Is there anything that really like comes to mind for that for you, Matt?
In terms of like one I really liked, the whole deal with Zergos and the Spirit Healer, which ultimately led us kind of to finding out about the Valkyr and the Vrykul, which then led us to the Kyrian, who are essentially, spirit healers who aren't like the spirit healers that we run into are ones who basically, according to the lore that's been invented for them, they're Kyrian who realize we're not supposed to be dead. Like, our fate is to not be dead now. Even though we're dead, that's not our fate. So they put us back because we're not supposed to be dead yet. That's the lore behind why spirit healers work the way they do. Why they don't just take you to the Arbiter and go, hey, look, I found a dead guy. You do what you want with him. They put people who are not supposed to be there back. If you're not supposed to be dead, and it's like, why do they have that authority? Like, why do they just decide, oh, this one definitely isn't supposed to be dead? The fact that one of them could fall in love with a blue dragon, and just that whole deal, the lore of the spirit healer has become so goofy and fun to me. Because, this is just the mechanics so that when you die in game, you don't have to like make a new character, right? That's ultimately all it is. You die in game, you gotta take 15 minutes waiting for your gear to all go up to full, and then you can run around and play the same character again. But they now have all this lore for it, and it's really entertaining. I like the whole deal with the Kyrian and the Valkyr, and the fact that spirit healers are basically Kyrian who are just not, essentially have decided on their own that the spirit of the law is more important than the letter of the law. Instead of taking you to see the Arbiter and be, slotted into your house, so to speak, they take you back because they look at you and go, nope, this guy is definitely not supposed to be dead. And that implies that there is some force that is killing people that aren't supposed to be dead. Every time I think about it, I get kind of giddy at the idea. Like, imagine if this whole deal with the Devourers and all that stuff that we're looking at possibly in the future is related to the fact that spirit healers even exist, because they're surreptitiously trying to alter the balance on reality by killing the people who aren't supposed to be dead. But the spirit healers are like, we're not letting this slide. We don't care what the rules are. No, you're not going back. So in terms of like in-game lore that's already been established, that's one of my favorites. In terms of headcanon that I've come up with to explain things, like I've said, I think that for me, mostly it's just the fact that in my head, warriors, everything they do is based around one of the three things: getting extremely angry and doing something physical, getting extremely angry and shrugging off something, or getting extremely angry and figuring out how to say something so horrible to a dragon or a goat man or a basilisk or whatever that it comes and attacks you instead of other people. Because we don't have magic. We can't magically challenge them with the light or, be a bear and just make a big bear noise. So we're literally figuring out insults for rock monsters. I feel like there's got to be there's a warrior big book of insults for things. And you're like, it's got one of those things on the side, like with the little divots that you can track what's, just run your thumb up it and boom, be it that thing. And you just pop it open and go, okay, Micthan Dalaravak. What did you just say to her? I told her that her eggs were all fertilized by a basilisk. Is that why she's trying to kill us right now? Yup. So that's my headcanon. That warrior taunt, as opposed to everybody else's taunt, is basically just the big book of English of insults getting flipped open and like, aha, this one will work. Because really, taunt is ridiculous. It's like, how do I even this thing? I've never even seen one of these before. It's a big statue with an Anubis head on it. Why did that work? How did I manage to insult it so that it comes to attack me? Do I just wave my hand at it? What? So yeah, that's my headcanon. There's a book compiled on Azeroth. It probably has new editions every expansion with insults for like whatever you're going to run into. That's my headcanon.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorites is definitely the evolution over the years of Hearthstones in general. I remember, I think in the original book, I'd have to dig it out from my desk, and I don't feel like digging right now. But in the original manual, they were just described as like arcane rune stones that allow you to teleport in the way that, like, not having to find an archmage would be necessary, because it was coming from it was coming from Warcraft 3, where mass teleport, you needed an archmage and you needed to be in that circle, otherwise you just didn't go. So over the years, watching how it sort of evolved was very entertaining for me, where they were then considered still really rare artifacts, yet every player in WoW has one. But the story of it didn't really line up unless you consider the fact that you have to you have to disconnect from every other player and realize that you as a champion, or you as like this high powerful entity, is being loaned one of these absolutely precious stones, these artifacts, by your respective faction leaders. And then over time, what a Hearthstone was became a little more fleshed out. And it wasn't necessarily just an ancient artifact. It was something that could be created. As a matter of fact, like beings like a loon, or the high priests and priestesses, the high priestesses and the high mages of the Kaldori Empire could create them back in the day. Like, there was a precedent for it. As a matter of fact, in the story, Tyrande Whisperwind actually uses a loon's power to forcibly change who a Hearthstone is bound to. Like, there are these little things like that are really, really interesting as far as how it sort of evolved, but the true origins of it still have never really been discovered. And I also think it was really funny because as you're going through like early days of the game, it's such an oddity when it comes to story. Like, King Varian at the time believed that, if you go back to the Stormrage book, that they were just things of myth or legends, that they it was a mage or an elf thing only, and he had never seen one. But then you have Brawl Baremantle, who had seen a Hearthstone twice prior to the war against the Nightmare, which I think is just absolutely fascinating. Or then you have a legend in game of a dwarven innkeeper, I think it's Stonekeeper, who tried to make a deal with a gnome warlock to turn his daughter into a Hearthstone so that she would always return home to her father's inn. Whether or not that is actually something that ever happened, it's a funny little thing in the game that it's like, yep, this is a story. We think this happened. We don't know that it's true or not. Can a person become a Hearthstone? Who knows? Or the Hearthsteed having a little line or a throwaway thing where it was a magical construct rumored to have been made from the same mineral or stones or that a Hearthstone has to be crafted from. Or Hearthy, which is a battle pet, I think, which is an animated Hearthstone that was created by a wizard who refused to wear robes with pockets. Just didn't want to wear robes with pockets. Like, it's such a goofy little thing, but this goes back to like filling in the blanks on it, make the world feel more alive, because it is such a goofy little thing. Going back to the lack of death, like the whole.
And you know what's
Go
really
ahead.
funny? I'm not trying to like break it in, but
No, please.
I went and looked up Hearthy while you were talking. Hearthy looks exactly like an earth elemental, except the center stone is a hearthstone.
Yeah,
So it's like
and
somebody
it
picked up a
doesn't have a head. It
hearthstone.
doesn't have a head. I don't think.
Yeah, but there's like it's really hard to tell because it's not a really big thing. So yeah, no, it's messed up. It's kind of cool. I just think it's kind of fun to imagine. Does Hearthy exist because some mage didn't have pockets, or does Hearthy exist because some mage was bored?
Yeah.
And just wanted to see, like, yeah, can I make it animated? Like, yeah, I could bind Earth Elemental to it. That's cool. And now that shamans give me a dirty look again. Look, I'm sorry about water elementals, okay?
But the headcanon-y one, or I guess the one that I spent like not a lot of time thinking about because I have too many tinfoil hat theories and stuff rolling around in my brain always, is how pocket dimensions are handled in game. So in game, and this is probably something a lot of players don't necessarily think about a lot, but for whatever reason, this is something that I occasionally think about, especially when I'm leveling alts or going back to the original main cities, Stormwind or Ironforge, or going back to whatchamacallit, Orgrimmar. Wow, words are hard. But like, go to the Mage Tower in Stormwind and look at it from the outside. Then go inside and go through the little portal. Where the hell are you? Right? Because you're not somewhere physically, at least not that you can really think of. There's no windows that point outside. It's filled with a layer of magical constructs. It's got broom sweeping. It's got elementals about. It has a very ethereal feel to it, but it's somewhere, but also nowhere. And that's where the portals are for Stormwind. And I'm looking at it like, this is basically just a pocket dimension. The mages somewhere decided, hey, we need more room. Cool, let's put a bigger room inside the smaller room. And that's what they did. And you see this happen all throughout. Wow. Dalaran was lousy with it, right? Orgrimmar has at least one instance of this. Like, everywhere you go in the world, there's been some evidence of this. Was this something that they learned from Titans? Was this something that was based off of the same spell that was used to create the elemental prisons, but instead we just now are able to add an extra room to our house? like it, nothing ever explains it. They never talk about it. They never do anything with it. It's just a thing that exists. And like Matt going back with like Hearthy and be like, oh, it's just, here's this. I was bored. Here's what I want to do. Okay, cool. I can do it. Great. Let's go. It's like some mage literally was like, in my brain, it's just like, man, my house is too small, but I don't have the building permits to go any further. What if
only I could twist reality and create a cyst of another dimension inside my house that's bigger than the house. Yeah, nice. That'd work. Yeah, we could do that. And meanwhile, somewhere Raden is like, that power is so fundamentally destructive to reality that I had to bind it to another plane of existence. And you're just taking off pieces and sticking them on your house because you just can't stop collecting leather pants. That's great. Maybe that's why we had to get rid of void storage.
But I mean, that's something that, like I said, like I would love to have an in-game like nod to it at some point. Doesn't even have to be an explanation, but just a nod to it, like some actual powerful character, like Jaina literally sitting down and going, "Why do we keep doing this? Like this is a thing we all seem to like just do randomly. Why are we doing this?" or have like Caligos go, I never really said anything about this before because I was kind of like on the whole like, you humans and your mortals are kind of okay. but you really should stop poking holes into reality, because like you're just literally thinning the walls, and the devourers are gonna like start coming through, and that's gonna be a bad time, and we don't really want that. Like, I don't know, but it's something that I would absolutely love to see somebody actually address, in the same way that like you, Razor, that you put out here, which is in the Three Hammers book, when you have Anduin trying to Hearthstone out. And until this point, we've never seen an NPC Hearthstone. We've seen like Jaina teleport, we've seen magic users teleport, we've seen them hitch rides with mages and do the teleporting thing, but never really use a Hearthstone. And like seeing something in a book that acknowledges that was like really, really cool. I'd love to see them acknowledge all this interdimensional space that we just seem to be carving out randomly for whatever various reasons we possibly can or need to. Like, I don't know. I think it would be fun. I think that'd be something that I would love to see addressed. Do you have any other comments for that, Matt?
No, I think it's one of the things that it's kind of fun to think about the difference between how, all these other beings and entities and forces treat these kind of magical abilities versus how mortals treat them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like, there was like one thing, I don't think this was WoW related, but it still kind of works for WoW. A guy was talking about how, when we graduate from our magical academy, we tell all of our students to go forth and craft a unique spell tailored to their own soul that is the full expression of their inner being. It's always Fireball. They just always make Fireball.
Except for the one guy that decided to animate the broom to sweep his lab.
Yeah, but still, the idea that, you've got the ability to twist reality, and you're just making balls of fire to throw at people. It's like, think about how hard that spell probably was to come up with. It's like, it may not have even existed before the Arathi War, but then they gave humans mages, and humans immediately were like, no, I don't have time for this. I just want guy to blow up. I don't have time for the subtle weave of energies. I'm just going to make everybody in a circle around me freeze to death so they can't hurt me. And then I'm just going to throw fire at that guy until he's dead.
When you have a hammer in your hand, eventually everything looks like a nail. That's just how this works.
And when you have a blowtorch in your hand, eventually everything looks like you should be going fire. So,
well, I think that's going to do it for us today, folks. I do want to thank you for joining us. As a reminder, Blizzard Watch is made possible due to your generous contributions at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Your continued support means that this podcast site and community is able to thrive and grow. Blizzard Watch supporters enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to the podcast, better chance at having your question answered on our podcast with the Q&A free site experience. Again, if you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, be sure to send those in. You can send us an email at podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. You can also hit us up on Discord. We have 2 channels set aside. The Q and Podcast Questions channel, open for everybody. You can just go ahead and just throw those in there. And again, what show it's for, give us your name pronunciation. And if you're a Patreon subscriber, as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on, we have the Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel, where we tend to look there first. Just that little extra thank you. And as always, check out our other podcasts. I normally don't shill them too often on this one, but our Blizzard Watch podcast, where we do talk about things other than just Blizzard, but that's where our main news sources are for all things Blizzard, and a lot of other gaming related news around the world of gaming entertainment. Feel free to check that out. Our Tavern Watch podcast, which is our monthly podcast where we talk about tabletop news, and this is everything from board games to TTRPGs to card games like Magic the Gathering. We talk about that there. And then we have our live play. Every month we do one where we do a little mini one-shot 3-episode stint where you can kind of enjoy some of the role-playing aspect of the tabletop role-playing scene without having to go too far. But if you enjoy that and check out our other stuff, we would appreciate it. Drop us a comment and maybe engage with our content. Maybe share it with your friends. If you can't support us on Patreon, we appreciate that too. With that, folks, we'll see you next week.